morning. Welcome to International Investment from Punta, Chile 2025. His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Chile, Gabriel Boric, is now joined by Minister of Finance from Chile, Mario Marcel, together with the Intendant of the Magallanes and the Chilean Antarctic region, Jorge Cides, and the Chair of the IDB, Ian Goldstein. Welcome. Okay, so the authorities have just entered the room, are now taking their seats and welcoming the authorities that are here today. Many of them have come from Santiago, others, many investors as well, experts on investments, and also at the national and the Magallanes region. Welcome everybody, and Ms. Fresia Santov, we want to welcome you. The Ministry of Finance and the Agency of Promotion of Foreign Investment in InvestChile. We'd like to kindly welcome you to the starting conference of the International Investment Forum Punta Arenas 2025. Green Investment in Latin America and the Caribbean, Solutions with Global Scope. This event is developed within the framework of the 65th Annual Assembly of Governors of the IDB, an instance which will be undertaken during this week in our country, and where economic, financial leaders from the 48 member countries of the IDB, and from the private sector as well, will be discussing the challenges and opportunities of development in Latin America and the Caribbean. Today we are joined by, we are welcoming the main authorities of the country, the senior officials from international bodies, and of course the economic and financial leaders during this morning. Representatives from different sectors, ambassadors, mayors, and representatives. Also more than 100 representatives from companies both national and foreign. We want to kindly welcome His Excellency the President of the Republic, Mr. Gabriel Boric Font, and also the Chair of the IDB, Mr. Ilan Goldfein, and the Regional Governor of Magallanes and the Chilean Antarctic, Mr. Jorge Flores, and of course, the Minister of Finance, Mario Marcel, and those who are joining us this morning, whether here or via streaming, and also the officials of the presidency. We have a key objective to move forward in your common commitment towards sustainable development and strengthen the Latin American, the Caribbean region, with making it more attractive for foreign investments, committed towards the accessibility and giving a new protagonism to emerging territories. We gave the region of Magallanes and particularly Punta Arenas as an example of how sustainable development, especially the development of strategic projects associated to new energy assets such as green hydrogen, can be a driver of economic, social, environmental development responsibly. This session will start with a welcoming speech by the Governor of His, followed by the interventions by the Chair of the IDB and President Gabriel Boric. Now the conversation will open up with a panel, the panel of investments with a purpose, solving global challenges, where we are going to be able to know the experiences of large companies developing sustainable projects and the more global perspective from international bodies such as the IDB and OECD. We are going to start a second block with a panel about funding projects for a zero emissions future. And of course, we are going to have the presentation by the CEO of BidInvest, James Swilling, who is going to be here as a speaker, and where we are going to be learning in the second panel about the best mechanisms for using capital towards sustainable movements and different options as well that exist. We will conclude the session with interventions from Ministry of Finance of Chile, Mario Marcel. And before we start, I'd like to remind you that this event is being broadcasted via streaming, as I told you before, through the IDB social media, InvestChile, and of course, the Presidency of the Republic. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the Governor of the region of Magallanes and Antarctic, Mr. Jorge Pérez.
En tu publicación de LinkedIn me puedes etiquetar.
Welcome everyone, President of the Republic, Mr. Gabriel Boric Font. Thank you so much for joining us. And then Goldfein, President of the Prince of Latin America, and also thank you to all the IDB team that has been with us this week, both in the mayors, governors, and also today in this meeting. And Mr. Mario Marcel, thank you so much as well, Minister, for thinking of Magallanes for this meeting. And then, thank you for the Minister, various professionals, and that they made this event possible, and especially our director, Flores, and also the professionals that have been working so much to make this event feasible in these conditions. Statisticians, the Ministry of Magallanes, are going to be joining us during this event. I also want to thank those who are here today. It's more important that we're joined by many ministers from the presidency, that the Minister of Public Works, Mr. Lopez as well, Mr. Diego Farov, a great friend of the region, and the presidential delegate, and also Mr. Jose Luis, for joining us. And then the ambassador of Canada as well, in a while, and of course, and one of their army vessels as well, the Canadian Army, in a first meeting in this sector, so more than welcome to this region. And their secretary as well, and also Mr. Maximilian Brown, thank you so much. And we have the Vice Chair of Corfo, who has been the entire week with us, so thank you so much in different issues that we are going to be commenting. And I'd like to welcome a great friend of the region, former Ministry of Finance and General Manager of our mining in Codelco. So welcome, a great friend of Magallanes as well. Allow me to mention that, to welcome you with a great big hug. You are here at the most beautiful, largest region in the country, and equivalent to Greece in size, a region that embraces change, which has great opportunities in the 21st century because of its nature, its indomitable nature. Slightly water, one of the most valuable resources of the 21st century, and also something which allows us to have 5G internet. We want to bring this connectivity even to the Chilean Antarctic with a kettle racing that has more than 140 years experience in hydrocarbons. We have the NAP and Metalex team as well, who have been working for years. This experience is really useful for us for the challenges we have that we're going to be commenting during the day. And also fishing and salmon breeding. More than 20% of the natural production in the country. We are the largest producers of salmon in the world in this region. Tourism, as some of you have been able to go through, not just in Torres del Paine, but also an extraordinary growth with an Antarctic climate growing by 20-25% per year. And I want to highlight companies that have been helping us. Some of us in Antarctica 21, with this beautiful aspect of the continent and within the country, trade, especially for those who are joining us. This region has instruments and tax incentives that are huge, from the duty-free zone, where today our trade industry is developed, and we have been talking to the Ministry of Finance to move forward to a services duty-free zone like the one in Panama. And also incentives that stimulate investment, foreign investment, just also especially when it comes to trade, not only for Chileans, but also I know there are many of our Argentinian brothers who are joining us with a historical friendship with our neighboring provinces. But to this effort, this huge historical effort, there are emerging elements. IT, especially in what data center and big data will be, in a region that has both social and investment safety. We are looking for independence, food independence, in the far away that we, how far away that we are, and especially for our development.
There, I'd like to speak about our launch in the region of Magallanes regarding food industry and tourism and Antarctic. We hope we visit the International Antarctic Center with more than 24 countries that will be from Punta doing this leap to the Antarctic as a port, aeroport, and optical fiber in Antarctic. And from this visit, green hydrogen with the development of 20 projects approved this year in its RCA, 2 projects in assessment, and Magallanes today is 2% of the national internal gross GDP, and we have been able to advance in the organization of small and medium companies. And we've done a wonderful work with BIB Magallanes, the technological center that has embraced us along with Corfo in a giant work. And our regional director, with her, we have seen the governance, human development, environment, infrastructure, development, and regulations for over many years. This opportunity, to be able to take this opportunity, environmental baselines for the first time, agreements of programming for public works with Austral Port Works to develop our ports, a national policy on the topic with a very big investment made by Chile, the Association of Companies of Green Hydrogen, Strategic Committee, and an agreement with Magallanes between the state, the regional government, and the companies to offer this to the region. Today, Magallanes is living the 21st century. It wants to be a region of world science, a region connected to the world, a region of green energy, a region of opportunities, and these opportunities need partners. All those that are joining us this morning. We believe that from the South, we can contribute to improve this world more sustainable. It's at our only home, this planet. Welcome to the region of Magallanes and Chilean and Antarctic. Thank you very much. We'd like to thank the words of the governor of the region of Magallanes, and of course, we will continue inviting the speakers this morning to this stage, following up the president of the IDB, Mr. Ilan Goldfang. An applause, please. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Our president, Gabriel Boric Font, president of the Republic of Chile, Mr. Jorge Fríes, governor of Magallanes, Chilean Antarctic, Mr. Mario Marcel, Ministry of Finance, to the ministers, Diego Bardonis and Jessica Lopez, Ministry of Public Affairs, Diego Pacheco of Codelco, and those joining us from Corfo, ambassadors, authorities, and the private sector. I'd like to tell you that we have over 50 world leaders here, presenting over 15 countries, including Canada, Colombia, France, Mexico, Germany, Italy, Spain, United States. And we have more countries, over 60 participants representing 38 companies, organizations, including Codelco and others. It's a privilege to be here in Punta Arenas, capital of the region of Magallanes, a region of high strategic importance. It has been a bridge for many conventions, and today it is positioned as a key center for investments and industrial development. I'd like to thank those that have received us these days and the earlier days before we arrived, to the President Gabriel Boric, to the Finance Ministry, our governors. Some of you might have heard a phrase saying that in Magallanes there is no bad weather, just bad clothing. And I use it to say that it's a great metaphor for the development of investment. With an adequate preparation, challenges become challenges become something to be overcome. They become an opportunity. Today is a key moment for Latin America and the Caribbean, that we are key actors in the world. We are expanding our role with the advancements in industries. We are rich in resources, but also we are well positioned to be a long-term industry. We have comparative advantages. First, the resources. The region has 2/3 of lithium of the world. The energetic costs in many areas are of the most competitive ones at a global level. And often port infrastructure in regions like Magallanes can offer strategic advantages. In particular, it has an industrial base and 30 treaties with 65 economies around 80% of the GDP is related to this. Chile is the greatest producer of copper, the second greatest producer of lithium, that today are key for energetic security. The potential is huge. We see that Chile can generate 70 times more energy of all the energy produced in Latin America today. This is a vital capacity for the world. It's vital for Europe that today is searching for chains of provision of energetic raw materials. And Chile is well positioned for example, as a provider of green hydrogen. I was in Germany not so long ago. This industry has the potential of creating 32,000 employments in Chile, strengthen the value chains, and generate new economic policies. Leverage these opportunities and advantages, and have a joint vision of the public and private sector to generate growth. No entity can do this alone. This importance of development is not only strategic, but a common interest that we have in all the region because it generates employment, improves productivity, benefiting companies and workers alike. And something very important, the more prosperous is Latin America and the Caribbean, the more prosperous we all will be. This is what the region is asking from us, and that's how we are responding. We are positioning us as a development pole with bases in the private sector, IDB that has 65 years of experience, generates synergies and benefits countries and peoples. That is translated in actions and concrete realities. For example, today, 44% of the investments are channeled through here. With its model Invest Plus, it produces an increase of capital, or IB Lab, that focuses on startups, the companies that are beginning. It has made several investments and has a scalable investment model. But that's not all. Investments need the adequate conditions as well as the public sector and the IDB. It's essential to create a favorable environment for investment. Without adequate conditions, we won't mobilize resources. An efficient state is key for development of the private sector. That's why countries must be supported in institutional strengthening that must be based on policies designed for that purpose. IDB works on building stable regulatory frameworks, developing infrastructure, and training people and staff. This is essential. We are seeing how the synergy between the public and private works is important. In Chile, we are working in several areas
Here, IDB fund is just to find the Chilean government. The IDB contributed some of this land is looking to reduce and mobilize up to 5 million, 5 times more. And IDB invests, our private arm, at the same time is investing on infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and working with the private sector to escalate this condition in these projects of wind energy, solar, at a large scale. But if I say just more examples of Chile, you will say, okay, well, wait. We're helping the government to consolidate the country as a hub of innovation for the region, strengthening digital infrastructure, cybersecurity, talent, technology, and artificial intelligence, helping SMEs, and also both private and public parties. And I want to say, and obviously what needs to be mentioned, this is a good example, and by being a good entry point for explorers. And what the best example, what we are doing today, the first commercial global scale plant of green fuel is built here. And it shows that when the conditions are there, industries grow, employment is created, jobs are created, and some of you will have the pleasure to visit the plant and see how innovation and investment translate into concrete impacts firsthand tomorrow. From the IDB, I want to tell you that we will continue with this role of doing in this part, in the region and the world, Chile, and the war between countries, and so on. But we are going to we cannot do this on our own. Now, development is not just a strategy, but it joins the region. It brings the region together in Punta Arenas, who has always looked beyond the horizon right now. And here, we are moving forward together. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to ADB Chair. We are going to remind you that there is simultaneous interpretation service. And this little device has to be facing this scenario so the service can work. Please, because many people have come a bit too close to the booth. Okay, solo puede ayudar con la interpretación y la transmisión en inglés-español, pero para esto tienen que tener el dispositivo que es infrarrojo hacia frente del escenario. We are going to continue and now give the floor to the President of the Republic of Chile, Mr. Gabriel Boric Font. So he can please join us on the stage. Thank you so much.
Good morning to everyone. I'm so pleased and honored to receive you here in Magallanes as President of the Republic and as a Magallan President. The air of the Magallanes Strait, along with that sun that enlightens but is cold. I truly feel emotional and full of life being here. But before we start, I'd like to give a national news, not from the IDB, but I think it's important to transmit this to the press that's standing here today. Yesterday we had several fires in the region of Araucanio and Biobío, and that's why the evacuation alerts SAE were activated. We had nearly 100 people in shelters. I'd like you to know that all the government is deployed within the framework of these fires, and we are with the affected ones and their families. Last night, the firefighting teams were deployed all the time to be able to extinguish the flames in the critical zones, especially in Trayen. And today, they are focused on the regions where there is fire to overcome this as quickly as possible. I'd like to ask all the people in the area of the fires to follow the indications of the authorities. We have currently 27 fires that are being fought. 24 have been extinguished, controlled, excuse me. And we have to remember the importance of being responsible. We have had a season with many fires, but we have been able to control them on time. This is a result of a strengthening of CONAF and of the collaboration of the private and public sector and the support of communities. It's very important to be able to prevent this because they are mostly a human responsibility. So I'd like to insist in moments of heat waves to not make any fires in non-authorized sites, and know that we will keep supporting you. This is relevant because one of the things that we have spoken about with the IDB is precisely how we move forward in integration in Latin America with a problem that's not common. That is quite common, I'm sorry. As not so long ago, we saw this problem, that there was a problem in Bahía Blanca in Argentina. We have had permanent fires in the Amazonian sector, and our region has faced earthquakes, floods. We have had different types of disasters that force us to think how we face climate crisis, but also how we act together. In that sense, I like to thank the support that we have had from the IDB and of CAF as well. The IDB is working on a project to be able to generate a greater integration in the regions of disaster, and that's quite positive because IDB acts as a spokesperson between among the government, generating an integration that is not just a rhetorical one. We are used to speaking about integration in Latin America with a lot of speech, but it's very difficult to implement this, and IDB has helped us with this task. And that's why I'd like to thank them for that. Having said this, I'd like to invite those that are not from the area to have the opportunity to go around and do the Antarctic route. Chile, as you know, is one of the 12 countries signers of the Antarctic Treaty. And not so long ago, we were with scientists and other professionals. We reached the South Pole, where all the directions are to the north, and we ratified the importance of Magallanes, our region, as the port of entry to the Antarctic for the world. In the slides that we were seeing, while Mr. Fries, the governor, was speaking, they were showing the project that we have worked so much on. We were speaking with the minister that when we about the contest we will issue this year, but it's a story that precedes us. It goes beyond those that are here present. Yesterday we were seeing a brief theatrical presentation about the pilot rescuing Shackleton in 1916 within the framework of of the shipwreck. So Magallanes has a lot of history. I invite you to go to the fort of Bulnes and to know it and breathe that history. It's time to look at the strait and take a deep breath. This place, as Mario Marcel told us, and the president of the IDB, has been a place, a stage, not only of explorations to the Antarctic, but also of world commerce. It was the contact between two worlds for so long. And today, the region of Magallanes has so many opportunities, and we have to know how to leverage them. One of them, the most relevant one that summons us today, is the energy transition. The energy transition that in Chile, I speak about all the country, not only the Magallanes region. In Chile, we don't see it as a heavy load, as a sort of last-minute imposition, but as a tremendous opportunity to build a new development model, giving higher added value to primal resources to the generation of new industrial poles at the hand of copper, lithium, green gold. We are generating links between schools and professional technical schools, universities, regional universities, the University of Magallanes. But it's a task with meaning as well, because it's an opportunity for business, and that's why we're here with you to reinforce the necessary collaboration between the public-private sector. But it's also a humanitarian challenge, maybe the biggest one of this generation, to face the climate crisis. That's why I was thinking before coming here, while some boast and say very provocatively at the north of the world, drill baby drill, we say at the south, clean baby clean. That's our slogan. We want to contribute from Chile for the world in a vision that it is possible, at the same time that we will replace the energetic matrix based on hydrocarbon, generate new sources of opportunity for our population. You know, the wind that was waking up the president of the IDB is the promise of a green future here at the south. And in Magallanes, we find ourselves in a key moment to transform the industry of green hydrogen into a world of development for the future generation. And at the other extreme of the country, in Antofagasta, Tocopilla, thanks to that flaming heat of the north, it has become the first clean region of Latin America, and we meet all the conditions to be a key actors in the world industry of green hydrogen. But above all, we want Chile to grow in a sustainable fashion, and for that, it's important to generate the conditions of accrual, of transmission, of exportation, and of course, and the benefits that are generated from this industry should arrive to the citizens. One of the things that I think that the business world and the state together have learned during the last decades is that there is no possible development if that development doesn't arrive to the table of our citizens. It's not possible that to repeat old experience where great richnesses would just arrive to the hands of few people, and the communities where that developed them, those industries, remained in poverty. We cannot repeat that. We have the conviction that it's not only possible, but it's desirable to do it that way. That's why we bet on solid alliances between the public and private sector that allow a development of green investment projects that are a contribution to the global goals that we have set as humanity from the Agreement of Paris. Our commitment is to move forward with the industry of green hydrogen with the policy of state And I think that's important, and it's a value of Chile. We're not speaking about a particular initiative of just one government. We're speaking about a state policy where, for example, ex-President Bachelet and Minister of Energy of the government of former President Piñera are contributing. This is a long-term policy, regardless of the challenges or problems of each term of government. We will continue this policy and delve into it. And regarding this, we have many challenges. Yesterday, I was speaking to many of you, and I'm fully aware that all the investors of long-term investments require certainty. Certainty doesn't mean to remove risks, but to the maximum possible. You know that in the world of entrepreneurs and short and long term, it's impossible to eliminate all the risks, but the state has to do as much as possible, which is providing long-term legal certainty in all dimensions, where politics may be predictable. I like predictable policies through time, where there are no last-minute changes that change the rule of the game, that puts at risk the development of the country in the long term. And that requires all the ecosystem, from the tax system to the environmental assessment service, have clear rules that do not change once the projects are put in force or passed. And also the shared benefit with communities, that requires that developments be sustainable with the environment. And today, we have gathered wills for that, and that must be translated in clear rules, and we all have to put our greatest effort, and that's what is my commitment on behalf of the state. What are we doing now regarding the action plan for green hydrogen for 2030? This plan is in full enforcement with goals and defined objectives to install the necessary capacities to make this flourish. As part of this strategy in the next days, as the president of the IDB was saying, we are launching green hydrogen for those that want to invest in green hydrogen projects in Chile. This is the commitment of the state with multilateral institutions like the IDB that goes beyond the government to encourage the development of this industry to the long term. This makes possible that different multilateral entities like the IDB and European Bank have deposited in Chile trust for the development of this industry. There is an intangible that's very important for the development of the countries. That is trust. And that's why I would like to be optimist, because Chile has the conditions to generate trust. In spite of the growth rates, there was those that diagnosed that during the government we would come into recession, but it wasn't so. Last year, this didn't happen. So it's important to generate a system of trust.
I think Chile can do more, as we were discussing both with Minister Marcel and the chair of the IDB. Chile can do more. And we have to go back to get closer to a 4% and above numbers. But for that, we need the state to move forward with its commitment, for example, with the permits reform, to nationalize permitting in Chile. Mr. Grau, the Minister of Economy, who was in the activity we held yesterday, is here because he's not here today because he had to go and finish the final part of the permits reform that is just going through the Senate, and we're just about to get it done. We are doing our job. We need to generate this reciprocal trust and the other intangible aspects which are really important for our country and which is the basis of our development post-dictatorship, which when we went back to the democracy, and it's something really important for all the presidents that came before me, regardless of our political differences, have been caring for institutions. Here, It just doesn't work through Twitter or by changing the rules overnight. Here, we work with a long-term view, safeguarding the institutions we do have so we can move forward with a country development which is sustainable long-term. An example of this is the logistical development plan for the Magallanes and the Antarctic Chilean region, which is seeking to move forward with key infrastructure projects for the development of green hydrogen in the industry, such as, for example, the port terminals and the different ways. For example, I can highlight the expansion of the Magallanes harbor, which we expect to start operating during 2027. In our country, dear guests, investors, and I was able to speak with some people from Italy, where the public bank from Japan is also here, from Canada as well, investors from different places of Europe. And we know that the path towards development has no shortcuts. Shortcuts, usually, in most instances where people try to do so in these aspects, take us to a dead end. And by the way, there are clear rules that, especially following investment, innovation, public and private, and also fiscal responsibility, we can do more and we will. And that's why these meetings are useful to share these experiences. And it's really enriching to be able to talk to you. With some of you, that we have been able to discuss even more and know where the bottlenecks, which today generate difficulties for a concept that we mentioned, the last mile investment, where these bottlenecks lie. And I believe that within the legality, democratic framework, we can improve even further. But here in Chile, I insist, we have the conditions. And this is not just empty words, but this is supported by numbers. In 2024, foreign investment got to $13 billion, which is the third largest figure in the last year, so reflecting the trust of investors in our country and the certainty that are suffered by our country. We are a country that has been able to control inflation, which was inherited from the pandemic, that they rose due to it, and has gone back to a growth path without transmitting passing these costs on neither to the most vulnerable families nor the middle class. Now, here we need to grow, and we have to distribute things better. And these are not opposite things. As a president, as a progressive president, I'm convinced that you can move in parallel in both roads, better growth and better distribution of wealth, so we can have a cohesive society which sees the concrete benefits of development in all aspects, not just for a few. From this far away southernmost land where the world ends and begins, I want to tell you that you have the commitment from Chile, from our government, and from myself as a President of the Republic to collaborate with all countries, economies, investors, and companies that can share this path with us. The IDB chairs the summit is very true and part of the fundamental strategy of Chile in these uncertain times. And this is a state strategy, which is diversification of our partners. We have treaties with 65 economies in the world, and we are working very strongly to reduce reliance on large powers. I have been to India. I'm going to India on Sunday with a delegation of business people, scientists, authorities, to be able to open up new markets for our country. During the year, I'm also going to be in Japan. We have been in China, in the US, in Europe. We signed the update of the framework agreement with the European Union after 20 years of a free trade agreement. And right now, in these uncertain times for the global economy, where there are some who are betting on protectionism, closing borders, we're saying no. We need to collaborate more. We need to seek where we can adjust the pieces of the puzzle. It's not just one piece on its own. This is Chile's political stance when it comes to integration with the world. Integration with the world and political strategic autonomy. We are not going to be subordinate to anyone. From Chile, we believe we can have relationships with all the world following the principles which have inspired our international policy, which is why I'm most optimistic regarding the future of my country and also the region, because we're working together with institutions like the IDB, but also public-private cooperation, I am sure that we can achieve an outcome which is more egalitarian, sustainable over time, and benefits all of us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, President Gabriel Boric, for his words. Now, we want to please have the to all the leaders of the institutions that are organizing this to come closer. So we'd like to ask the officers from these institutions to come to the station. Please, everybody stand up so they can appear in this official photo that will now be taken. Okay? It's going to be an official photo. His presence here in Hotel Dreams. There are also other activities, of course, that he will continue participating in while we start with other of our fora. The first panel, as we said before, we have had different perspectives, so we can start this session from the most regional level up to the perspective of a government committed to green development, going through the global analysis of the current investment scenario and its problems in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, we want to ask you to go deeper with some protagonists of these challenges. For that, I'd like to invite you to our first panel, Investment Suite Purposes Solving Global Challenges, which will be moderated by the Director of InvestChile, Carla Flores. In this instance, and by the way, Carla, thank you so much for joining us here in the stage. In this instance, representatives from foreign companies with projects that offer solutions in tourism, energy transition, and also offices from international bodies are going to be addressing the role of companies in sustainable development from their perspective. Once again, we'd like to remind you, and you can follow us live via streaming through the official social media of the IDB, Invest Chile, and the YouTube channel of the Ministry of Finance. We are going to start this first panel, Investments with Purpose, Addressing Global Challenges. So, Carla Flores, please, and thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I want to thank you for your presence this morning. This panel has the purpose of us discussing investments with a purpose, and the core issue of today is precisely us talking about how states, multilateral bodies, and the private world can work together, pushing forward different initiatives and measures from their own roles. So these investments we need to make to fulfill our climate change commitments are not just able to move forward with such changes, but also the benefits of these investments and make them reach people and territories where they are implemented. I'd like to thank our panelists, Firstein and Novik, the investment management of the OECD, and before being in the OECD was also the multilateral manager of our chancellorship. So please, thank you so much for being here today. And also, we have our representative of the IDB in Chile, Florencia Tademo here, who has been helping so much in all of these topics. She was the manager of the Southern Corn countries, and recently she's also a Chilean manager for this area. So welcome, Florencia. Javier, IDB, CEO of AES Andes. It's a DIV, no ADB, okay? No relationship to the body. Javiera has worked in financial leadership positioning in Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean, and South America, and in the last few years has been in charge of Chile Renewables, and has really moved forward the incorporation of strategic partners for the growth of renewable energies in Chile, and has participated and really led all these processes as well. Welcome. Max Correa, welcome, the director of the Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners for Latin America, has more than 15 years of experience both in the public and private sector in energy-related projects, infrastructure, tourism at Corfo. We have had you in the private sector, and also having different roles where you have always been leading energy transition. It's a pleasure to have you here as well. Please, and also Jaime Velásquez, welcome as well, the chair of Antarctica 21, who hosted us so kindly in his home yesterday. Jaime is the co-founder of Antarctica 21, the chair of the board as well, has been trained as a mechanical engineer in the University of Concepcion, has been an entrepreneur his whole life, participating in different businesses, including hotels, finances, real estate, culture, and his most recent objective is a green hydrogen project in Tierra del Fuego. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, to start the conversation so we can break the ice as well, I want to ask a general pillar I'd mentioned is human capital, which was mentioned by Anna too. And we really discussed this with Adolfo of the human capital in Magallanes. How can we make it so people here have what they need, for example, to start working in the green hydrogen industry? And this is about any investment, not just investment on energy transitions. Key challenges, private investments have been facilitated by multilateral entities such as the EDB Group, and then this is also necessary to execute those projects. To implement this and move forward, we also apply this energy transition and apply other investments as well that are long-term. I want to emphasize something else, which is even more specific for the energy transition, and which is technological development. It's important to invest on promotion, technology, to be able to take care of the opportunities that are presented, for example, by being here in Magallanes, but also from Chile and other countries as well, create this capacity, this technological and scientific capacity. So the different systems in this energy transition are really become value chains that are helpful for the communities as well. So, and this is what I think is something really relevant. And then it's about investments with purposes and how these investments are felt in the communities they get to. So, and then we always discuss the different budgets, clear rules, environmental considerations, the rules of the game, really long-term measures. But the measure we are asking ourselves today is about the impact that we are doing is extremely relevant, especially when we are working this kind of forum. So I'd like to thank the fact that we are addressing this topic in the first place, highlight the initiative from the OECD. We participate actively in this group that has really driven what we do. We do measure impact on our investment portfolio precisely along the same line, because we believe the work we do is not just impacting the large macroeconomic numbers, but it has an impact on the day-to-day life of people. Now, from the private sector, please tell us what would be relevant for you to be done so these investments can first be completed and have the impact they should have. First of all, thank you so much as well for the invite, and I'd like to congratulate you for the idea of doing this in such a beautiful place. Excellent idea. Well, from the private sector, we clearly see that everything that is America has a competitive advantage which is huge, as both the president of the IDB and the president of the Republic were mentioning. We appreciate this, and we have entered into our strategy in the Americas. We are focused on these countries mainly where we can invest and think long term. We are convinced that this is a long-term industry. We know this is a long-term, and for that, it's really important to have these relations that are responsible. So, countries like Chile, which are a clear example of how their history was built in terms of democracy by faithfully using this brand. We always say Chile has all the resources, but how these resources used are vital. And we believe this is an example of what all countries in Latin America should be doing. This is the most important value Chile has today, because the variety of companies that are investing in Chile is a very virtuous element. And this brings innovation, brings resources, brings capabilities. So we are convinced that what countries need to do is to work on their branding. And their branding is legal stability, the regulatory framework. All of these are the main incentives that countries need to be working on to achieve what Chile has achieved today, at least in our sector, the competencies that we have. I mean, there are no company that is not investing in Chile in our sector. We are all here. Why? Because the market is good for us. We are provided certainty. There is a long-term strategy regarding hydrogen, for example, the companies that we are developing right now. So I tell you that what governments have to do is to work on their branding as a country and create a safe, certain environment in the region to develop long-term projects, and always taking care that what's urgent does not take you away from what's important, because that's part of what Chile and all other governments in Latin America have to do. Thank you so much, Javier. To add to this, well, my job is to talk to the investors daily and visit different countries, different instances, and it's amazing how the Chilean brand, our trajectory, the trust of from so long with concrete outcomes, for example, in our system, which is admired around the world. I mean, as a successful initiative, certainty, the institutional strength, and sometimes it seems like a mantra, but by God, it's been difficult to do so. We have to maintain it and uphold it over time. The perception investors have of how to operate in Chile, from a foreign standpoint, is really positive, because of course we have so much to improve on, always, from all aspects. But I believe we need to value what we have and continue building. Or Max, please. I think it's even more valuable than me telling you this story of an investor not so long ago. because most of this question has been answered. I mean, it's about certainty and availability. I work in a fund that is Danish in origin from Denmark, which started 15 years ago from a group of executives who decided to leave a state-owned company, the largest company in America, to create a separate vehicle for investing on renewable energies and only in renewable energies, starting a company that also had the oil wells on the Northern Sea. And it came from a group of investors, from a pension funds. They had a really good vision that they are betting on this, and they applied 1 million euros on a dream to develop offshore wind projects, which was just getting started back then. And they really believed on that, on a very difficult industry, which is related to hydrogen, because there was a lot of initial enthusiasm and many decided to join this enthusiasm, but then they realized the difficulties implied by all of this industry. Only a few were left who were able to take and transform the industry into what it is today, and it's also growing and doing really well so far. This group of executives are doing really well in the first project. They develop a really good project. They provide return on investment, and long story short, in these 15 years, they manage more than 35 million euros. And the last fund just closed 12 million euros, that in these uncertain times of this global economy is not easy to raise this kind of capital. And with the commitment to invest exclusively on renewable infrastructure, and with an additional feature, which is not just purely financial, but they also are involved in the development of projects, which is called the green stage. And by picking up these development risks, they can also offer more attractive returns and better adjusted to the risk regarding investors. And one of the last few instruments or investment strategies in 2021 and 2022 are for expanding and moving away from their original comfort zone. From these first few countries, the largest economies, the more stable and safer, to move towards emerging, growing economies. So they decided to take a bit of a more geographical risk on. And initially, they selected 15 countries. And one of these countries was precisely Chile. Why? Because of the reasons mentioned here that have been mentioned by the authorities as well. Chile has had a history and policies that are coherent long term regarding the energy transition, together with the fact that Chile has a very high renewable potential compared to other regions. So they started exploring Chile, but other countries in the region as well. And very quickly, they realized that in Chile, there is an industry that is very well developed, very competitive, with stakeholders that have been on it for a long time, because the more competitive you are, the more difficult it is to seek these opportunities. And nevertheless, by doing this analysis, we did realize that there are still many opportunities in Chile, and there is a very attractive potential over time. The thing is, how can we leverage this in a smart fashion? And good news is that the fund, ever since we started, were investing 2 years and something ago, they made their decision, and we are building a battery storage system in the Taltal municipality, which implies a $250 million investment, and very important. And the fund didn't even go to the banking, the financial sector. They just used their balance sheet, their own capital. Of course, now we are in negotiations with the IDB and others to refinance the project, because many of the risks have been mitigated. So that's why it's important that we are in construction as well. But we took a lot of regulatory risks. For example, the regulations regarding batteries are not fully ready, but we decided to believe in Chile precisely because of what has been mentioned now. When it comes to hydrogen, another strategy of the fund as well, or the funds right now, also they believed in Chile for more than 3 years by now, and counting on the winds in Magallanes, because, and I have to say, yes, we are partners in a project with Jaime. The wind resource in Magallanes has no comparison. We have measured 11 meters per second with a factor above 60, and this is something that for Scandinavians and for Danish that are really used for this, and they really like to come here and see it with their own eyes. Last week we couldn't even speak because of the wind. But why in Chile? Because of the resource and also because of this perspective of providing stability to investments and being able to believe in safety of being able to invest in something long-term such as green hydrogen, which is not something immediate, is something that is in a process of creation, transformation of expectations correction, but we have been investing in Magallanes. I don't want to say exactly how much, but those the tens of millions of dollars in projects that are now under environmental assessment, and the director of the project will also be in a panel later on. So I believe that here the discourse and the conversations we are having right now move us towards action and reality. And also, but this, I just want to tell you a brief story of what we've done. Hey, but you are mentioning such important points. First, the construction of this country branding with an investment sector, certainty, robust institutions, which are enabling but also provide access to funding, support from other entities, to leverage resources, find local partners that help you land these projects. These are relevant aspects that make these projects possible to be developed. And I know that you're also part of the Magallanes Agreement, which is looking at how we are going to be working on human capital, which is an industry as well, and it's great that we're having all of these conversations. So what has happened in other instances doesn't happen, and we can work on these enabling conditions, both infrastructure and human capital, in a timely fashion. So this impact can really reach the communities where these projects are being inserted. And I like to hear from your story, Max, because really building these long-term strategies is not something easy to sustain over time because of what happens from one administration to another. Some institutions are more technical that need to provide roadmaps, and that governments need to pass the torch to the next one. And this enables investors in the long term and makes them think of Chile as a place to invest. So in practice, this is very educational for all of us that are here today. So thank you so much. Jaime, the floor is all yours. Thank you so much for the invitation. I represent Magallanes in this part. Just a couple of pieces of data to give you context. The artificial intelligence in the 70s, emissions, carbon emissions, or GFC, were around 20 billion tons. 25 years later, today, with raw data, Bill Gates came and he has been talking about how to avoid a climate disaster and reaffirms of this formulae that we are now at the 52 billion tons of greenhouse gases. That is, in a life cycle of 75 years of human life, we have doubled our emissions and the effects of these gases. And we are seeing the consequences. The climate is behaving very erratically and very aggressively. And not just in some places. All continents, even the Antarctic. And here comes the need to have this transition, to move to a green lifestyle, stop emitting greenhouse effect gases, because the next 50-75 life cycle, we could have a much bigger problem than what we have now. So I believe this is where countries that have the aptitude, the conditions that do need to become a part of producing transition energies, as they are called. If countries participate in this, evidently they must have conditions which Chile has. There has been a lot said about this. I don't want to go on for too long. These wonderful sites. I mean, this is why we have the best of astronomical observatories in the north of Chile, clean, beautiful skies, and the Patagonia. I mean, what can I say? Wind is a part of life. And this factor provided to Magallanes of 60% is something that leaves us in a pole position at the global level, no doubt. Even more so, many of the investors that are here today in the region looking into possibilities have been pleasantly surprised of something even better than they had expected. And here, I think people have already talked of the regulatory framework. I think this is the importance that us as a country and as a region do have a clear regulatory framework, which is precise. And whoever is coming to invest, they are going to stay. None of those that are coming, I dare say. None wants to cause environmental damages. Nobody. It's the other way around. Everybody is really respectful and they have very similar investments. But here, and allow me to say, Mr. President, I want to give you a message. Please help us so these projects do not stagnate and end up going away, because I don't think it's okay. Not what we have done so far. Just translates into a very nice environmental impact presentation or goes against administrative aspects and then gets nowhere. And it doesn't help. We need a regulatory framework. I'm not criticizing the government, by the way. Please don't misinterpret myself. Our system is not robust enough, so indeed, we can progress and move forward in that sense. So, my petition, Mr. President, don't leave the administration before setting this regulatory framework so Magallanes can get in this green energy production need. And we have it, you know it. Thank you so much, Jaime. And I'd like to highlight the really relevant initiatives that are being undertaken, and such as this discussion of the comprehensive permit system, which is why Minister Grau had to leave and couldn't continue participating in the event. This is an extremely important agreement. We have been moving forward in the Congress, and the call is upon Congress so they can help us with the activity to work on this, because it's been pushed by the executive branch, and we also have the National Environmental Service project in the Congress, and most of these projects are there. So it's really important for all of the other stakeholders. Help this can be processed quickly, but the signal has been given from the government to address these relevant that are so important topics. We're a bit short in time, but I want to ask a last couple questions, but just for us to answer them as briefly as possible, okay? I wanted to ask you a very important question, Anita, regarding how foreign investments and the potential for foreign investments, how can we leverage this to move forward with the challenges we have in our energy transition? Because the OECD in its last report exhorted Chile to keep moving forward even faster in the energy transition, and I think energy investment is a huge driver and a catalyst and a great driver by improving technologies, preparing human capital with know-how networks. But how can us from the OECD as a country, and what can the government do to leverage these investment policies given the context we are in? Thank you. I believe Chile and so many countries are a bit thinking of how to accelerate this energy transition and the role the public and the private sector can play. I'd say that, of course, the increase on public-private investment is key, such as the public sector has very important challenges in all Latin American countries because of fiscal deficits, for example, slower growth, a lower tax revenue, and there is a call for the private sector to play an important role and foreign investment especially. This is a very strong. So we're measuring the impact of direct foreign investment, and that's another type of private investment. And it is true that foreign direct investment, FDI, for example, regarding renewable energies, 10 years ago was 1% of foreign investments on renewable energy. Now it makes up 25%, so it has increased by 26%. There is lots of appetite from foreign investment to move towards renewable energy, even though there is still another percentage of solar, wind, and green hydrogen energies. Now, the thing is, and for this to have an impact, and this is the biggest issue that we are working on regarding the investment quality, is how you bring these investments together with other policies. This is key. These are the environmental policies, educational policies. We need to think about this holistically, and the plans that are being thought in here and other Latin American countries are having these visions because facilitating investment, this process of legal stability, as we have been mentioned, yes, these are important, but are also related with bringing the innovation that's going to be needed. Which are the human capabilities we need to develop in parallel? So this again can have an impact because, as mentioned by the president, I think here the main thing is that Chile does want to contribute to climate change, but also wants to have a more sustainable development, and also it's more inclusive and create jobs that have a better quality and also environmental issues. So I'd say very briefly, to bring these investment projects together with the political aspects and think about this in a more holistic fashion. To continue in the same line, Florencia, we have been working together on digital aspects, and as you were saying, for this to have an impact, you need to prepare our people so that they can absorb this. I wanted to ask you, Florencia, for the countries in the region, in this side of the world, where we have urgent needs as well, which recommendations would you give us to be able to have this balance between the urgent needs that we have and the long-term overviews we need to have? Thank you. First of all, I do not see this as an obstacle. I think if to these current urgent matters, if we address them with a long-term view, with sustainability, so and we can also be able to improve our long-term path. I will go to a concept that the president mentioned today, which was Latin America and the Caribbean to the solution as global issues. Think about our biodiversity. If today, for example, we have these public policies about preserving some rural areas, and this gives us a solution to these long-term problems, which is, for example, carbon capture. If today we decide in a sustainable, inclusive fashion, sharing this with the communities to invest in lithium, in copper, as Chile does, in a responsible manner, we can also position the country, in the case of Chile, as a provider of a global solution for this problem. And the same thing can be said, for example, of food safety. Today, we have public policy decisions or investment decisions which respond to the need to continue producing sustainable foods and also positioning ourselves in Latin America and Chile as part of the solution for these food needs in the world. I think by bringing the urgent needs to and the long-term view together and how we can add value as Latin America and the Caribbean, and also with the IDB supporting us in this timely taking advantage of these opportunities. Thank you, Florencia. Okay, so to our other panelists, I want to ask you a last question. What are your plans? What's your vision for Chile and also for the region and for Latin America and the Caribbean? Okay, and it's a just a very short question. What are your plans in Chile and in Latin America? Okay, so in Latin America, we continue growing, we continue fostering our investments and our transformation to renewable energies in all of these aspects. And I told you a little about of what we are doing in Chile, and especially in our investments outside the US. We developed our strategy and incorporated 2,200 megawatts renewable energy in 2018, and it was a very important investment. And today we have a medium term plan to invest 4,400 $4.4 billion rather than until 2030 in renewable energies. And these are the main investments we are doing today, which include these battery storage systems, which has positioned us, and we can proudly say that in Chile we have the largest portfolio in Latin America, and especially regarding storage batteries, we have 141 megawatts, and we expect to reach 1,700 megawatts in the medium term. So we are really focused on these batteries because batteries provide us the main solution for this. And we all know that the transmission is much more difficult in terms of solutions. Now, fortunately, the idea of this energy transition is something that we are doing and that will help us provide solutions in the short term, especially when it comes to renewable energies. And it also allows to facilitate this transition. And also, what we are working in the medium long term in our green hydrogen projects, where we want to be a part of this strategic part as well. And how we have been moving on our ELA project in the Antofagasta region, Taltal, a project which has been developed to be developed when we have done this. And then when we want to be sure that this project in this assessment system, which is so robust in Chile, is going to be addressed correctly, and we are going to be doing this correctly and over time. So this is a very nice project that has a lot of investment. It will have a lots of people working. So we want this to be developed in this environmental assessment system, and hopefully this investment can be initiated for this market and of this hydrogen market, which we believe is going to be fundamental for this energy transition and to fulfill the agreements that Chile has signed regarding these aspects. Thank you. We are really happy, and because of everything that we are developing. Okay, Max, I'm really interested because I know that your fund is one of the largest ones in the world, especially in renewable energy. So I really want to know about your plans for Chile and also Latin America. Okay. So initially, I said that the country, or we chose Chile because of the geography of these places that were outside our first growth. But we are looking at opportunities in the region, and Colombia, Peru, Panama as well, Mexico too. We have a pretty well developed portfolio, but Chile, I think, is especially, or we want to need to try and have these batteries as well. We have this development, and what we have done, we're looking at the opportunity of doing something related to this part, which is obviously a very source of important source of demand. They have this attractive infrastructure, which, and regarding your question, while this is a very large fund, resources are limited, human resources are limited. So in our case, hopefully, we can continue consolidating this in the case of Chile, and for that we must always remain competitive. And I'd like to, because Jaime opened this door, so to say, to a more concrete vision, the governor mentioned here in Magallanes, this situation, we believe this can be very useful for the situation with some adjustments that most likely need to be made, and discussions we are having through energy, economy ministries that are working on this, but are now in the hands of the Ministry of Finance. And now the Association of Hydrogen Development Companies reached an agreement, because it's not easy to reach an agreement on which are the measures, because we have a proposal, and I think there is something that would be really useful to do. Okay, it's amazing how in this brief conversation we can realize of the multiple factors that intervene at the end of the fact starting a project, that this has so many dimensions, and how important it is for us to be coordinated and integrate all of this, because it's impossible for us to look get somebody for just looking at the numbers. I know we are really against the clock, but please tell us about your plans for in the short term. But also I want to ask you how tourism could also move forward on energy transition issues with this perspective in Magallanes. Well, I see an absolutely direct relationship. Right now, we have our second vessel, so to say, Atlas 6, which means exactly one position, just one tier below an icebreaker to go to the Antarctic for Antarctic tourism, and also Valdivia as well. And this ship is going to be the first made in America, which is a ship of propelled with a hybrid energy power. ACPOP is a method which replaces the classic motor in this case, and the helix. And this is a different model is on the hull, and that provides an efficiency of more than 20% compared to the conventional option. Electrical and continuous current, but it's hybrid, because we are not just generating electricity for this, but we also store 1.6 megawatts. We store this in onboard batteries. This allows for the ship to save lots of energy, because these engines will always be at the optimal point of operation according to this system. So we have two effects. We have the propeller effect and also this energy resource optimization. And how are these brought together? We signed an agreement with IF Global, so for them to provide to us, with being the first company to use carbon neutral fuel here. And as we achieved that, it made a global news in the energy sector. Evidently, there was an avalanche of questions to if of people being able to use this carbon neutral fuel, but they don't have it. I mean, this is a pilot plant, we all know it, and they want to move to a more industrial scale. And I hope and expect it will be so. But not just to be able to move the Zodiac vessels, but also the main proposal is this e-fuel in this manufacturing hierarchy to be the most important one, and also be used in aviation. That is, that we could, with green energy produced in Magallanes, supply all tourism vessels that go to the Antarctic with zero carbon fuel. Wonderful, isn't it? Well, I want to thank all of you for your presence today. And President, you want to take the floor? Yes, I just want to say that I received your message. I think it's really important for you to know that this is a dialogue for us as a government that is really important, and that adds some elements that without these dialogues wouldn't be so easily seen. And I'm also mentioning what both Jaime and Max were saying. On one hand, there are draft bills that are both operating in parallel to strengthen these environmental impact assessment services. In one of these directions is that these comments that are made have more relevance and precisely avoid generating this sort of a deadlock, or so to say, you're hitting your head against the wall, which I presume is a source of frustration from the technical point of view. And this is something that we need to improve. We have room for improvement. And I'd say this is a more complex political discussion because of its eventual tax impacts, which is something that already exists in this industry. But therefore, I also take that message. And there is an opportunity, which is not just about the text, this letter of the law, but also how the services are provided regarding the relevance of the comments that are made, and the final objective of making these projects move forward. That there is a conversation, a collaborative convention, where this is not just understood as something as the state is just putting obstacles, but generating conditions of that make this viable. And I've said this particularly in Magallanes. I mean, all of this needs to happen within the framework of law, taking care of strengthening the institutions. A country cannot go against its institutions, but I think the institutional culture must also move forward towards a more collaborative vision of these public-private projects being brought together. And finally, what we are asking from you is that also from companies, from the private sector, if you have this discussion and this objective of how investments are going to get to the normal people. Allow me to just bring you a concrete example from a positive perspective. Yesterday, at the inaugural dinner offered by the IDB chair that took place at the Explorer House. And at some point, I was stopped by one of the cooks, by the way, from the Magallanes region, and he asks if we can take a photo together with the kitchen staff. And I go speak to them, we hug each other really, and what I saw there, beyond just enthusiasm because of this instance, is that they were already preparing a calafate sour with regional products, which I didn't ask about their salaries, but I hope this is properly compensated. And they briefly introduced a play with musicians and artists because it's really difficult to sustain art in the long term. So this generates a movement that goes beyond logic, that goes beyond investments. And these ecosystems are tremendously positive. This is something that are important as well because it allows for sustainability in the long term and in the social aspect. So what we have to do, at least I take this away as homework, and we are going to be working with my entire team so this ecosystem can be even better than before. Thank you so much. Thank you, President.
Entertaining dialogue. It was so good to know the position of the president. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone for this first panel. While those that just presented take a seat, we will continue this conference thanking the president for his last comments and thanking him for his presence today. I'd also like to remind you that you can follow this transmission live in this event via streaming through the websites, the official websites of IDB and the YouTube channel of the Ministry of Finance. Without a doubt, we live in a special context, especially challenging. The environmental crisis has changed many economic, environmental, and social purposes purposes has been spoken about this morning that are common to all countries of the world. Today we can add social political elements that keep the international actors very alert. To add to this global outlook regarding the need to reinforce the efforts around green investments, we are joined next by the CEO of Invest, James Screen. Please go ahead. An applause for you. Thank you very much. Scriven. First of all, great. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you, President, for your words. And also thanking the governor for his hospitality. Our governor is the Finance Ministry, Mario Marcel, and also the authorities of Codelco, Corfo. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I would like to compete against that beautiful view we have outside of the Magallanes Strait and to tell you a story of why we're here. I'd like to tell you why we're here and what is our role. And with that, I'd like to include, because we're in the IDB group, the following images. When you hear about the IDB, you hear about a big entity called the investment group in the most important investment group in Latin America that works with three organizations. The IDB, an organization that works with the government, BitInvest, that I represent, that works with the private sector, and IDB Lab. But the obsession and the work we have as a group to improve the life of 670 million inhabitants of our continent, with which, if you look at in one word, what we do is improve the lives of the inhabitants of Latin America. How do we work in three different groups that self-relate? One, as you may have heard before, of generating a competitive environment so that the private sector works and works well is a lot of beat. In the middle, we foster the development of a nation through the private sector. And lastly, IDB Lab works with the technological innovation and companies that will boost the development of a country through technologies, undertaking several challenges. Through this presentation, I will do an IDB dive in number 2. IDB Invest. We work with the private sector. Think of us as a bank, as an insurance company, as a consulting firm, consulting group, and an investment fund, all within one entity. So our role is financing and knowledge. We finance long-term projects. We do this through a capital investment or a local currency investment, providing terms, but we also have consultancy work. We work with clients to develop a project. The second concept, size. Well, in the last 8 or 9 years, we have invested $62 million in our region, not only from our own capital, but we attract co-investments, investments from abroad, many of which were presented in the former panel. We have done over 500 projects, but when we speak about development, we don't measure this just with money. We speak about impact. Nearly 5 million of small and medium companies finance the limitation or mitigation of greenhouse gases and employment's supported. So we look very closely at these indicators, and this also provides a orientation to our institution. What is our objective? To be a partner, a reliable partner, to work with you, knowing that we know the region very well. We work together with the IDB to understand this public-private dialogue. We work to help companies to develop a business plan and implement it. We attract financing, but we don't do cookie cutting. We work directly with each of these companies in a solution that is financial. Before I delve into the project's presence, today 50% of our people are in the region. We have a big office in Santiago, but also growth opportunity. Our directory, our board just approved a regional growth plan that is quite strong, and 2/3 of the people will be in the region. I'd like to delve into the industry. Many of you represent different industries. We work in 14 of them, and in all the industries that develop a country: infrastructure, energy, and farming, and telecommunications, tourism. We work in all sectors, and we are divided industrially, and our intention is to have a close work with each of the industries. Some examples on a Latin American level, and towards the end I'll speak about Chile in particular. Most of you at one point landed in the airport of Lima and found one of the old ports, a small port that just had space for 17 million people. In work along with the company and the Peruvian government, we decided in the midst of the pandemic to build a new control tower and terminal to expand the amount of people that can receive that airport up to 38 million people. So this is a great example. We're about to open the airport. So the next time you land in Lima, you'll see a very bigger airport than before. This is about to begin, and it's a $500 million project, of which we financed 250 million, and we have attracted investments from abroad. And Uruguay, not so far away. This is what is called the road circuit number 6. They are 68 kilometers that go through the municipalities of Maldonado, Caledones, Florida, and you can see the before and after of what the project has been for us. A project that we're very proud of the road connectivity that we can find in a bank like Uruguay. And something that makes us very proud is the Puerto de Uruguay in Colombia. We did this in a very complex and remote area. Deep for this port, we worked with GIP here, who are big infrastructure investments at a worldwide level. We made this port and also worked on the logistical connectivity in G4 and G5. Lastly, Guatemala, at Corredor de las Flores, we used to take 3 hours to get there, and now just 25 minutes. And so these are our traditional sectors. But what brings us to Punta Arenas is the future. The future, when we speak about critical minerals, the role we have with lithium and copper, in particular synthetic fuels. We spoke earlier about the role of synthetic fuels, not only for ships, but for aviation. That has been a great change. Along with IDB lab where we work in the technological sector in sectors like agritech and foodtech, in reforestation in places like the Amazon, where we have a particular plan called Amazonia para siempre, or Amazon forever. So I wanted to give you examples of some of the new sectors where we're generating a lot of experience and work, and they are sectors that our board and our representatives will continue to explore. Several of you might recognize this route called the Curve of 365 Curves. I think it's the road of snails connecting Chile to Argentina. Many of us thank this road because it's a road to the ski center as well. It shows the complexity of working on emerging markets. A former market told me Latin America is not for beginners, and that's true. What we want to do as an entity is make this road as straight as possible by solving the development problems. And I wanted to delve a bit on that. At the beginning, I spoke about the fact that we didn't invest our own capital. Just our own capital. We have nearly 300 investors on a worldwide level that invest through us. They trust the IDB group and they work and invest through us. They have presence in the region. Nearly 80 are Latin America and Caribbean funds, but the rest, most of them are foreign investors that invest through us. Nearly 55% of our annual operations come with a co-investor. Last year, that amounted to $5,000 million. Why? Some of us in the former panel or in the same president of the nation spoke about diversity. What can we do to attract the private sector within our investments? Recently, an increase of capital spoke a lot about the risks of attracting of the risks that investors try to avoid. So we have many examples that we can work on to attract foreign investment. And we have a very strong program for capital markets where we work along with investors to generate products that can attract them. Historically, we would just do co-investments. That's done today. Today, it's a world of capital markets where we do programs in the United States of issuance of capital market. We do unions through insurance companies. That it's a great step for us. The airport Jorge Chavez of Peru, it wasn't done through banks, but through insurance companies, for example. Thematic bonds, we have over 40 thematic bonds for our own clients, whether blue, whether green bonds, an infinity of bonds that we have issued, with which don't think of us as a traditional bank. And that's what I wanted to say. We are a regulated bank, and that allows us to work on financial innovation. And I wanted to end with a couple of examples that we worked on with the Energy Ministry and Finance Ministry, a tariff plan where they spoke about the process of energy transformation that Chile is going through. And this is a great example. The largest bond that we issued in the history of investment, we co-financed $2,000 million through an international bank that allowed 29 generators to stabilize the prices, the tariffs. So that's the fees. So that's a great example. But closer to our energy transition, we have the GIN that approached us and asked us to work on the diversification on their energy sources. We closed 4 carbon plants and we are transferring all of that to renewable energy. How did we do that? Buying future bonds carbon bonds that could eliminate this process. Those are 2 closer examples to Chile. And lastly, I wanted to say that what brings us to Punta Arenas obviously is the future. Also, particular appreciation to another Magallanes citizen, Carlos Alvarez, a representative director of the government of Chile in our board. that I have had the pleasure to visit Punta Arenas with him, and we have seen many interesting projects. So the last concept I wanted to leave with you is that we're here to help through our different channels as partners. IDB is our set of units, of which one of them works closely with the private sector for the development of the country. And with that, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you so much for this presentation. And now we want to invite you to enjoy a coffee break for a few minutes. Most likely, what we just heard from our last speaker is about what we are going to continue analyzing in the next few minutes. So, in 30 minutes from now, we are going to continue having a dialogue in this International Investment Forum, Punta Arenas 2025. So, 30 minutes for a coffee, get a breather, and come back. Okay, we'll be waiting for you. had a really good coffee break, and of course, you've continued having these discussions during the morning. We have had an extremely fruitful day full of ideas regarding the future of green investments with a panel where we notice how companies can contribute to global challenges. In the panel we are going to be having now, called Funding of Projects for a Zero Emissions Future, we will be addressing one of the critical topics when doing investments in this regard. For that, we will be moderated by Solange Bernstein, Chair of the Commission for Financial Markets, who is going to be joined by representatives from international organizations, financial stakeholders, private investors, who will be discussing the best mechanisms for mobilizing capital towards sustainable projects. Okay, Solange, please go ahead. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, and good morning to everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to moderate this panel about the funding of projects for a zero emissions future. And this is in a global context, which I've been discussing during the entire morning, about how important it is to have this transition towards a sustainable economy, which has become a priority for governments, companies, most multilateral financial institutions, and this lies precisely on having a sustainable economy and ensuring funding, proper funding, to achieve clean energy, energy presence, energy efficiency, innovative technologies. And all of this has been important, but today is more critical than ever. In the case of where I'm at as a financial regulator, our role, we consider this to be fundamental to move forward precisely on these environments for investments, and for this not just to be profitable, but for this to be responsible from the environmental and social point of view, as that is the only way to achieve a sustainable economic growth. In the case of Chile, I'd like to tell you the financial regulator in Chile has as an objective, in terms of financial stability, by the way, and also market behavior, we have understood development as a sustainable one, part of our institutional aspects. So we have put a special focus on regulatory frameworks in the case of our financial regulatory framework, and also we are going to continue talking about it in this panel. And just as the compliance with sustainability standards, as it happens in the financial sphere, which we understand is in order for us to improve our global targets. So in this panel, we are going to be exploring funding mechanisms that are available, the challenges that these projects face, and especially in terms of access, and also how can we as regulators promote an environment where the sustainable investments are not just viable, but are also attractive. And then we will analyze the importance of collaboration between sectors, given these aspects, to mobilize the necessary capital and ensure this energy transition in terms of topics that were discussed during the morning. It is an honor to have experts from the financial sector with whom we are going to be discussing. And we expect that you can share your perspectives on how we can then address these challenges for a zero emissions future. I am sure that in this panel, the panelists are going to be offering proposals on how to continue moving forward towards more inclusive, sustainable aspects. And with this, I'd like to welcome our panelists and thank you so much for your important participation today. Here we have Elizabeth Roberts, who is the Chief of Investments from IDB. She has graduated and has a master's from the Cornell University, manages IDB investment activities, and in the energy, transportation, water, sanitation, healthcare, education, and also has another responsibility. She has experience in funding the energy and transportation sector in Chile, Uruguay, Mexico, and Brazil, including a variety of renewable energy such as wind and solar projects. We also have Antonio Castilla, chair of ACN Capital. He is a commercial engineer with different studies and a master's in international business and has been working this for more than 30 years. Currently is a founding partner of ACN Capital and AGF Ventures, which is also focused on being the first fund in the region in Magallanes. Okay, I'd like to remind you how they are supporting this entrepreneurship and this ecosystem in the region. He's also the director of the stock exchange, which is a parallel responsibility. And also he's the director of different companies, both in Chile and abroad. We have Sabina Wexler, who is the general director of official institutions for the Americas from BNP Paribas. Sabina graduated. uh, you had an MBA as well and joined BNP Paribas. And here customers include transnational bodies, national sovereign banks, and institutions in America, and also co-leads the working group on sustainable funding for institutional coverage in BNP Paribas as well. Mr. Dong Hyun Ryu, Vice President of Advice and Commercial Trade Agreements on the Corporate Solution Group from the Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, has worked on the funding of a project in SMBC, New York, and Seoul for 10 years, providing advisory and organizing different funding for projects, and also in America and Asia Pacific, between different sectors, energy, oil, gas, and mining. The SMBC Group has more than 150 offices in 40 countries around the world. They continue expanding at a huge institution. Maria Ignacia Varela, Vice President of Finance of HIF Global. She's the Vice Chair of Finance of HIF Global, where she's leading these processes when it comes to debt financing. And also in this role, she has been key to ensure many different projects. And we are being told that Marina worked in AME, the founding company of HIF, in the investment banking at Citi as well. Without further ado, thank you so much to all the panelists for being here today. And I'd like to start with a general question for all our panelists. And also thanking you in advance for the answers so we can have another round of questions. Okay? So in this context, which is so complex that we have been addressing in terms of the global economy, how challenging is it to obtain funding for a project in Latin America and the Caribbean when compared to other regions in the world? What is the role of regulatory frameworks, for example, which have been discussed this morning, and on the other hand, the technical capabilities to be able to manage this kind of projects with these technologies? If we can start with that question, and we will follow the same order as we introduce the panelists. So, Sabina, please. ¿Me escuchan? Sí. Muchas gracias por su amable
I will
introducción.
be
Y
speaking
pido
English
disculpas por...
this afternoon. So I work for BNP Paribas, and I will deliver sort of our thoughts from a commercial bank perspective. So overall, we believe LATAM investing in green projects does present some challenges, yet the region remains highly appealing for green projects. So I'll go a little bit more into what we mean by challenges and also the opportunity set. So investors in general have a plethora of investment options to generate returns, and that includes fossil fuels, especially in the absence of robust carbon pricing or well-established business models for low-carbon technologies. This does present a challenge for green projects in LATAM in particular, which does have abundant oil and gas resources. In the meantime, low-carbon projects often do face barriers such as high upfront costs, new technology risk, uncertain returns, and complex regulations. And furthermore, projects in the region tend to be smaller in scale with less visibility and revenue streams, creating further difficulties in attracting traditional investors. Investing in low carbon projects, and I'm sticking to challenges, can be also challenging when you factor in foreign exchange risk, inflation, supply chain challenges, and political volatility. And those are common themes in many emerging markets, not just in Latin America, where low carbon investment has historically lagged. However, we believe that these obstacles are not insurmountable, but we do need to address them and change the incentives for domestic and foreign investors, and that will require coordinated and determined action across the public and private sectors. However, we also believe that the market is extremely attractive despite the market challenges. An estimated of 2.1 to 2.8 trillion investments will be required by 2030 for countries in the region to achieve their nationally determined contribution that is under the Paris alignment. The region enjoys abundant renewable energy resources, plentiful sunlight, wind, and hydropower, and it makes it ideal for developing green projects. And similarly, LATAM is a major producer of critical minerals that are essential for clean energy technologies such as lithium, copper, and rare earth elements. Thanks to this abundance of natural resources, implementing green projects in LATAM actually requires fewer structural changes compared to other regions. And the necessary materials and conditions are already in place, making infrastructure installation and operational costs significantly lower. LATAM also has supportive regulatory incentives and policies that encourage green energy production, such as tax exemptions, subsidies, ambitious targets for emissions. And in terms of the regulatory frameworks, we do believe that governments can and do employ a number of measures in order to facilitate investments in these types of projects. This strong policy support is very important. And as an example, the green hydrogen initiatives, they can help green projects obtain financing by attracting investments and build confidence in the sector. And those, two examples include Brazil launching its hydrogen and tax credit policy last year, and also Chile introducing the National Green Hydrogen Strategy in 2020, recognizing the potential of green hydrogen in Chile. This roadmap was designed to promote investments and establish the necessary infrastructure, as well as put in regulatory frameworks to support the growth. And then as far as capital markets development, the governments can also help on that front. Chile was the first country in the Americas to issue a green bond, for example, in 2019. Since then, a number of other countries have done the same. Also, both Chile and Uruguay have issued the innovative sustainability-linked bonds, which we were privileged to participate in. Those are linked to specific KPIs. We've also seen a number of debt-for-nature sovereign swaps supported by the government, including several of them done with IADB, many in the Caribbean countries like the Bahamas, Belize, Barbados, but also in Ecuador. So we see those innovative transactions as also helping expand capital markets. And lastly, I'll mention maybe a newer instrument, and that's outcome-based bonds. So we've only seen about a handful of those, mainly facilitated by the World Bank, but we believe that that market will grow as well. And actually, we're working on one right now for the first coral bond with the government of Indonesia. So that type of technology is also something that could be transferred and scaled up here in Latin America. And I think it's also very important to mention the private-public collaboration. So that is absolutely critical because you have the private sector players like ourselves that can provide structuring expertise, can also find innovation, but you do need the public sector to de-risk a lot of these projects, some of which would not have been done otherwise. And I'll mention here, for instance, we closely partner with IDB Invest. focused on some of your de-risking structures, AB loans, for instance. They offer a halo effect, which do help investors bring in additional capital. We also would like to see the scaling up of AB bonds and additional and increased use of partial credit guarantees and these types of instruments, which will also help bring in additional capital into the capital markets.
Thank you very much. Let's go now with you, Elizabeth. Perdón, vamos, Elizabeth. Me cambié inglés.
Voy a hablar en español. ¿Me escuchan? Sí. Bien. Bueno, gracias por la invitación.
Thank
Es
you
un
for
placer
the
participar en
invitation.
este panel.
It's a pleasure to participate in this panel and be here with all of you in this event. It is a really good question. I do agree with the comments, but I think there is a very important participation from the private sector in the region, and it's something very relevant compared to transportation sector or sanitation, for example. More participation from the private sector in the region. In general, I believe there are more incentives in other regions in the world when it comes to investment tax credit from the US, for example. Inflation Reduction Act have had a very relevant impact in these different projects on renewable energies and other sectors as well. And this is something that coexists in the region. And that's why these projects must be really focused in terms of the projects themselves. And let's say these companies participate in the region, in most cases have a very large scale, which is why they have enough profitability. But an individual project is going to typically have a lower profitability compared to other regions, and that is a challenge. And what we have seen in the region that's been working pretty well are energy bids, to grant these PPAs, these agreements for energy purchases. This is something that banks really like because this is a stable revenue index to dollars in many cases, because there are lots of investors who want to invest in USD, and that has a very relevant impact on the region. We have noticed typically the banks don't have this much appetite for market risk, the spot risk. There are some, and the IDB is one that does have appetite for this risk, but in general, commercial banks will not be taking this risk. And this is something that we need to consider. And also, commercial banks are very active and they understand the market very well, but they don't want to take this risk in most cases either. And also, when we talk to commercial banks, talking about Latin America, they talk about 5 countries, usually, to us at least. Chile is one of these 5, but they don't mention Ecuador or Guatemala or Paraguay. And that's where there are many activities and very, very good projects. So that's something else which, for someone who is developing a project in a small country, I think it's even more difficult to find the funding because there are less international banks that have appetite for a project in Ecuador or Paraguay. While Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, that's a different case. But in some countries, it's difficult, and that our role is to drive investment in these smaller countries. Thank you so much. I have to say, as a regulator from the banking sector, I don't understand commercial banks. I mean, and their risk aversion when these are resources from depositors, but there are different avenues, right? So there can be investment towards riskier projects for investors that have a more appetite for risk. So we need to improve this system to bring these two aspects together. These people who have this appetite for risk and those who require funding for projects that are going to be riskier, right? And Antonio, so maybe you can tell us a bit about from that perspective. Thank you so much, Solange. Thank you so much to all of you for being here with us. And indeed, regarding this, it's been challenging to obtain resources and funding for these elements in Latin America. And I think the world is full of funding options of all different types, right? Only when it comes to risk capital funds. I mean, green, ecological, recycling, there are more than 400 all over the world. The challenge is not on whether the project is green or not. You just said it. But I'm not going to be talking about just the theory nor this promotion. I'm going to be talking about this from practice. From the 90s, trying to bring companies from all the world to invest in Chile in the region, and it happened to me in December of last year, where I was presenting a project, an interesting project in Chile for a debt fund, and the UAE. I was in Abu Dhabi. I was with Ambassador Tarud as well, with that kind of people, and it is in this discussion we're having this presentation. One of the people asked me a question of, okay, how could they see the risk if they invested in Chile of something being nationalized? And see, I was frozen, not because of the difficulty of the question, of just by them asking the question, because this is not even an issue in Chile. And why am I mentioning this right now? Because, as it was said before, investing in Latin America is different. But if you want to install a project with a green objective, first you need to go and compete against all the other projects being produced in Europe and the US, where there are issues that are still over there and not an issue here. If we want to have a sustainable development model in the Americas, and I mean, it's not even going to be an issue because this economic model is going to continue, it's going to be stable. That's basic. I mean, the EU, for example, after 50 years after a war, they reached an agreement and they built this huge market. And they have been working towards a diversification strategy. I mean, these are not even issues, but when you go, okay, if I were to present you a project, for example, and I present a Magallanes project, they may know about, for example, how the pisco sour is made better than myself. It's not even an issue for them. But when I go somewhere else and I go to London or to the US, first, you need to explain what Chile is. Well, Chile, okay, just next to Argentina, and yeah, Messi, world champion. Oh yeah, then they know you. And this Chile has been working a lot in this role of InvestChile has been fundamental. We were just talking about the Chilean brand, which is an asset. But when you present a project, we are still in a practical term. You need to be able to promote your country. You need to advocate for your own attributes to first differentiate yourself from your neighbors who, in this regard, they believe to are all the same regarding privatization. Unfortunately, due to experience in some countries that do have these practices that make these issues come to light, we need to separate yourself as a country. What's Chile? Which are your attributes at Chile? Which are your mechanisms for compliance, for the tax, legal standards, and so on? And this is been useful for other similar projects. And these mechanisms are really important for investing, but you have to start promoting Chile, the regulatory framework, investment protection. That's the first stage. Then you start talking about the industry, about the sector, the different industries, and how in this regulatory framework it improves. I mean, there is so much to talk about this, for example. This is complex, but if you're going to be explaining this to someone from the outside, you need to cover all your bases. And all of these two aspects are behind a competitor, someone who is seeking the same resources to place their wine farm in Norway or Oklahoma or somewhere else. Only then you are going to start talking about the project, the third point, when you have been able to overcome these other two obstacles. And there are projects which are sustainable, bankable, and all of these products. So, and amongst all of these differentiative products and the competitive advantage your bank has is where you have to mention all the attributes that lead to this green concept, the CSG attributes as well. And today, as opposed to the 90s, I mean, that was not even an issue back then. But in every presentation I see, wherever I go to support the different business people and projects from Chile and other countries, the first ESG slide is on a second, third priority in the presentation because it wasn't even an issue. Now it is. But, hey, and this was also said by Diego, we need to have the appropriate conditions to invest, which is why first you need to be able to promote your regulatory framework, your economy, your country, your brand to provide this certainty. And then the industry. And it's not easy. In other countries, it's not even an issue. It's not an issue. It's not an issue in Europe. But here, where every 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, depending on the government regimes, we start having these discussions of which is the model of a society, the role of the individual, where we want our society to be, and we move 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, then our discourse becomes more difficult. So it's like, okay, that's why people go, I need to ask the question. So there is no nationalization, and that's not an issue here. So we need to first cover all of these bases before we even start worrying about anything else. Challenges in the region. Maria Ignacia Varela, please tell us from your perspective. Thank you, Solange. Our perspective, we believe there is a lot of appetite for investing on these kind of projects, mainly in the region and Latin America, and due to an excellent plant factor we have, the excellent renewable conditions we have here in Chile, Magallanes mainly. So we have our plant operating since December 2022 and promoting methanol and gas and exporting it to the world. And last year we raised $220 million with mainly Japanese shareholders. So I think the appetite is there. What we need to do as developers is to make it so our projects are profitable, and to make our projects more bankable, we need to do many things, amongst which a host-taker buyer who has an important credit worthiness with a long-term agreements, hopefully with a fixed price, and if not with a fair price, that can help us be able to pay the debt, have a resource for us, and with that we are going to be able to fund this project, for example, with these project funds. It's really important as well to have technology providers that are tested and proven, who have already had some operations, that are credible companies, and that are also willing to provide the necessary guarantees so we can have this project in the first place. On the other hand, what we have to try to do and reduce is everything about this bridges project. For example, for these projects, we need to develop many different parts. We have a renewable power, we have electrolyzers in our case, we produce a methanol, for example. So we need to try, hopefully, to be as vertically integrated as we can, to be able to reduce these breakthroughs as much as possible and lower or mitigate all the risks associated as much as we can. On the other hand, we also need to have a pretty strong and believable support that has experience. For example, building in Punta Arenas is difficult because of the weather. We need to achieve companies that have had experiences in this kind of climate and this region, and then we are going to be able to achieve having an attractive project for the banks plus a stable regulatory market, as it is the case here in Chile. This project is going to be funded here in the US or in other countries in Latin America as well. Thank you so much. And then, Don Kyun, from your experience, please. Entonces,
When
básicamente,
we're looking at transaction opportunities in Latin America, we look at countries like Chile, Mexico, and Argentina. And some of the common themes these countries have is, first of all, the availability and expandability of existing port facilities. And second, the strong, significant market presence of sponsors, major sponsors. And third, the local engagement expertise. And finally, the upstream participation opportunity for Korean and possibly Japanese off-takers in the upstream of the renewable energy generation. Having said that, some of the financial potentials to discuss is, I think, a little early in the stage, but definitely these are some of the commercial advantages that's been displayed, which I believe is, one of the key long lead items that takes a long time to develop.
Thank you, gracias. Now, let's start the round of specific, perdón, empecemos las preguntas
let's start with
específicas ahora.
specific questions from Dan and then inverse order as before. Esta vez vamos a hacer la pregunta en inglés desde la perspectiva de
Bank.
un gran
What
banco.
is your experience in structuring financing for zero-emission projects? Which is the role of sustainable bonds? Sabina was talking us about this different type of financial instruments which are sustainable. And which projects are you looking at in America Latina, in Latin America, and what type of projects, if you can share with us that?
Right. So I just mentioned about our transaction opportunities we're looking at in Chile, in Mexico, and Argentina. But to go into the specifics, I think from a PF lender's perspective, in order for us to actually lend to a project, we need to have a bankability assessment. And for a bankability assessment to be available, there needs to be a commercial viability of the project. And at the core of the commercial viability lies the offtake arrangements. So the key is to actually look at or structurally consider into the project what are some of the offtake arrangement that could be structured into the project early in the stage, because as you know, green hydrogen ammonia is a highly illiquid market globally. It's not traded globally yet. So means there's less of a merchant market to sell once there's no offtake arrangements, right? So the more it is unlikely to sell on merchant basis, lenders will focus on long-term cash generation availability of these projects. Hence, offtake arrangements are critical to these projects. And when it comes to what we're looking at from a reciprocity perspective is that Chilean developers and Mexican developers tend to want to develop an equity and also offtake and obviously ultimately financing from these Asian offtakers. But from a Korean or Japanese offtakers perspective, when we look at Chilean opportunities, first of all, the most important thing is supply chain and geopolitical risk diversification, which we're seeing elsewhere in the region globally. And second, more of a transparent framework, regulatory framework. And third, the clean energy potential that Magallanes has, obviously compared to other regions. And also a potential standalone viability of the projects without any reliance on subsidies. So those are the key important things. But having said that, recently in the past 4 months or so, some very significant events happened to Korea. As you know, one of the things was the market failure of Korea's first clean ammonia co-firing auction, which did not invite many awarded contracts to the transaction, primarily because of various issues surrounding market design. And second, there was Trump got reelected as a U.S. president, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen to the IRA. And third, there's this President Yoon in Korea getting impeached. He's still under the impeachment process. And as of yesterday, our prime minister was the number 2 to actually, be the interim president, replacing President Yoon. He was also under the impeachment process, but the Korean Constitutional Court dismissed the case against Mr. Han. So Mr. Han is now back into the post as a prime minister, but nevertheless, there's a bit of, a political uncertainty driving the energy policies in Korea. And fourth, maybe there's something you guys already know, but the Saudi Aramco, one of the potential sellers to Korean off-takers, we announced a couple of weeks ago that they will reduce the blue ammonia production plan of 11 million tons in 2030 to 2.7 million tons by 2027, citing the lack of sufficient demand coming from Asia, notably Japan and Korea.
Bueno, aquí estamos llenos de incertidumbre, no
Of
solamente
uncertainties,
en la
not
región.
just in the region. I mean, this is a challenging issue at a global level. And Maria Ignacia, please. The global.
Different parts of the world are looking at the projects to finance in the region. In what sense are they a risk?
Okay. And in the beginning, what do you think is-
Majority. That is our main off-taker. That are operators for fuel. To use that in tourism in Antarctic. And we see that there's a giant opportunity to boost Magallanes in Latin America because we have to take advantage of the renewable resources that we have in the region. And regarding scalability to be able to reach these industries that are hard to identify, for example, the Navy industry, the aviation industry. For us, at least, it's difficult or impossible, so we have to seek other alternatives. For example, lithiums, we can go from ethanol to fuel or methanol to fuel on ships. So we have a giant opportunity to be able to scale and produce these fuels needed by everyone, not only export, but use them in our same region. Aside from Chile, we have projects. We have a small demonstrative plant. And in Latin America countries as Uruguay or Brazil, as well as other countries in the world like United States and Australia. And the green hydrogen industry, there's space for everything, even for capturing CO2. And we think all of this will help decarbonization around the world. There's not a solution that will be the only solution that will save us, but it will be a combination of many. To be able to finance all these projects, we have quite a challenging task to make these projects bankable, but joined by the support of other countries will help us boost this industry and allow them to be issued with a project that can be built on a large scale. Here in Latin America, our task is a bit more difficult because we need a basic infrastructure like the topic of the ports, but we think that on the other hand, we have the wind factor that will compensate for this, and we will achieve it and be able to decarbonize the country. Thank you, Maria Ignacia.
ya pasamos esa barrera, como el país, venimos a la región. Ustedes trabajan con distintos.
You work with different clients in different parts of the world. How important is it for investors to finance projects with a green seal? And how do they make sure that these projects comply with the expectations of those customers? That they are sustainable, genuine projects, verifiable. How important are they regarding taxonomy? We are working on our sustainable environmental taxonomy. Are you thinking about particular projects for the funds? The topic of the names of the funds, when you have customers, those are generally identified. So could you tell us a little bit about the details? Without a doubt, the green concept today is becoming increasingly relevant. The green seal of circular economy is increasingly more important. If ESG components are not incorporated in your presentations or in your concept or project, then something will be missing. It has to be in the DNA of the project. The projects we see in the region, in North America and Europe, follow the taxonomy known by these countries. And that's something that is seen and demanded. There are green funds that ask for this. What's important in all of this is not that your project has a green seal regarding marketing, but that it is effectively green, because the people that finance this are present verifying each one of these topics. There are verification processes in place in different countries that allow follow-up, but most importantly is that we have to understand that just like this wasn't a topic before, it's increasingly more important to work as a society and community so that this green seal may become the greatest. And for that, we have sustainable development. For there to be sustainable development, there should be development. And regarding sustainable, social, economical, and ecological and environmental, it has to be internalized in the DNA of each one of the people so that this is a plus for the future, not just something that sells. And that is achieved through training. We go to the beaches and we see how people throw their trash on the beach. So how will we ask that people tomorrow to be concerned of environmental topics? We have to work on raising awareness so that the professionals of tomorrow, the business people, entrepreneurs of tomorrow, internalize them. If it's internalized, it won't be topic. It will be internalized. It will be easier. Thank you, Antonio. CMF, we've been working with CMF for companies that issue values. We've been talking precisely about this. That's the commitment of me as well. We're trying to raise a fund in Magallanes. Everybody's looking to Magallanes. So please, let's all agree in developing a sustainable development model. There are 5 pillars of growth for this region, and we're standing looking at the world here. We need to change our image. And everyone is waiting for us to agree and put these differences aside so that this moves forward fast, so that children of immigrants make this possible. And we have to build this sustainable development model among all of us. This was possible in Finland. We can develop that specific model, but we have to change that ADN and that mentality. Let's see what BIT has to say, IDB have to say. They have participated in several photovoltaic projects in Chile. How can financial development entities support effectively the launching projects in Latin America? And what new projects are you thinking about? Green hydrogen. Thank you for the question. It's hard to explain better than James. In terms of what we can offer from the group, it's something that exists during all the lifeline of the project, starting from the work of the project done by the IDB to develop a project to attract private investment with a firm regulatory framework. That's something that's BID, IBD.
Empezando si hay estudios de factibilidad, si hay algo, estudio de ambiental, social, algo que se necesitan para apoyar el proyecto. Tenemos un equipo de asesoría, capacitación, hablamos de capacitación hoy, de gente, eso también certificación de bonos verdes, eso es algo que podemos ofrecer también después de cuando el proyecto está listo para financiamiento. Estamos listos para proporcionar financiamiento. Tenemos muchos productos diferentes.
We have many different
deudas subordinadas, senior, tenemos garantías, moneda local, muchos productos financieros dependiendo de lo que necesita. Tenemos el AB bond, como dijo James, y eso es algo que el producto tradicional.
That's something that the traditional products of the bank, like the AB loan, where there is commercial banks.
Y ahora el Invest tiene un AB bond en vez del AB loan, donde hay inversionistas de 1.4A o de 4A2 que quieren mucho apetito para el largo plazo y los ingresos regulares de un proyecto de infraestructura. Somos el único multilateral con este producto y hemos utilizado el producto acá en Chile con el proyecto de tarifas hace poco. Eso es algo que podemos ofrecer en términos de financiamiento. Y durante toda la vida del proyecto estamos con nuestros clientes apoyando, porque siempre hay momentos difíciles para cualquier proyecto y estamos con ustedes para encontrar una solución y seguir adelante porque queremos el impacto del proyecto. Eso es lo que queremos, el impacto del proyecto. En términos de dónde veamos proyectos, hay muchas oportunidades ahora. La demanda para energía está creciendo rápidamente y con eso hay muchas demandas, hay muchas oportunidades. Y para nosotros, proyectos de biofuel, eso es algo, biocombustibles, donde veamos muchas oportunidades.
El uso de residuos orgánicos para la producción de energía, eso es algo que estamos apoyando, financiando, baterías, líneas de transmisión. Proyectos de la región para y tomando riesgo. Eso es nuestro rol, tomar riesgo que los otros bancos tal vez no tienen, no pueden, no tienen apetito. Tenemos apetito para la región, para el sector, para apoyar en el crecimiento de energía renovable en la región.
Muchas gracias. Juegan un importante rol, ¿no? Let's go now to you, Sabina. BNP Paribas has been a key actor in financing green projects here in Chile and
clave.
otherwise. In terms
En
of
otras
solar
palabras.
parks, you have Gran Teno, Tamanga, as projects that you have been contributing for financing. How are you using your experience, your expertise in structuring financial products for sustainable investment in green energy, for projects to be at the same time profitable, but also aligned with global goals? Also, I would like to know a little bit more about, we were talking before about disclosure, information disclosure, how important it is to have sustainability information available for investors and for actors like yourself. In which sectors do you see opportunities here in the region? If you can address those, please.
Okay, I'll try to address all of them briefly. So fundamentally, when it comes to sustainability, we believe that sustainability is not just imperative for purpose, but we actually believe that sustainability is also imperative for profit as well. When it comes to pricing some of the scenarios, of course, there are challenges with those suppliers where the value doesn't fit the standard per kilowatt compensation paradigm and where they can change output rapidly based on demand. So for example, battery storage. So that represents one of the challenges with pricing and profitability. Overall, we do expect costs to come down as technologies develop and evolve with greater adoption. We also believe that the governments can help as well with some of their direct grants for research and development, with loans and with tax incentives. When it comes to capital markets, we fundamentally believe that green finance can unlock additional capital, and we've done it. We've worked successfully with companies all over Latin America across different sectors and across energy value chains to structure a number of interesting instruments. I'll mention some of them. Green bonds, most of you know what a green bond is, but essentially the use of proceeds is towards bonds under the specified frameworks, for instance, for investments in renewable energy. Green loans, so that's, standard product as well. We've also been well-versed in sustainability-linked loans. So those can be offered to companies with KPIs that are adjusted based on meeting certain targets, and they can be around CO2 emissions, but they can also be around social targets and can include a combination of both. For instance, number of women in senior positions as well. Sustainable deposits is another instrument that we've used with companies in Latin America, and what that is the deposits that they invest with us, we can only use to invest or reinvest in certain renewable or green projects that are specified under the contract. Green securitization is a newer product, but the collateral on the loans are on green assets. So those are some of the capital markets as well as some of the bilateral instruments that we've used very frequently with all kinds of companies in Latin America. To address your question on sustainability disclosure standards, so we believe that those are actually absolutely critical. So investors, regulators, and the broader market are exercising more and more scrutiny on corporate sustainability efforts. They want to make sure that they avoid any greenwashing, and also that the sustainability related labels are used for purpose and not just as marketing tools. So that is an industry, we're looking at the disclosure standards very closely. One way to sort of address this topic that we found to be helpful are alliances and networks. It's one way of establishing such standards. So for example, over 120 companies aligned with the World Economic Forum to co-design something called stakeholder capitalism metrics, which is a set of data points that allows companies to consistently report on non-financial disclosures. So these are set up so that they are aligned among the existing ESG frameworks to create comparable data points across companies, across different sectors on non-financial disclosures. So maybe, hopefully I addressed that point. Then in terms of the sectors, so I heard, Elizabeth, what you said, the sectors that you named, certainly we're seeing similar trends and interest, I guess, and appetite. We believe that renewables in Latin America continue to be one of the greatest opportunities in short to medium term, just given the abundance of resource potential in LATAM. Just reading a stat here that the region could scale up solar and wind energy capacity by over 460% by 2030 if all planned projects are realized. That said, sometimes there are extreme weather conditions and there is a shortfall in renewables, so we also believe that it's important to diversify baseload power sources. Battery and energy storage systems have seen meaningful growth as well in the last year, and especially in Chile. We expect that to continue to remain a big opportunity for the banks. Electrified transport, electromobility, such as the electric buses. So we worked on a transaction together with IDB Invest in Colombia for electric buses. We also see that as an opportunity because in LATAM there is a high transportation usage. Water and sanitation, we still feel like there are massive investments are needed to expand service for both populations and for agricultural needs, including desalination plants. We worked on a project, Aguas Pacifico, in 2023. Also a maybe newer trend is green power data centers. That's also something that we believe offers an opportunity for investments. And lastly, I'll just mention that beyond low carbon, sustainability offers adaptation and conservation financial opportunities as well in LATAM.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Okay, muchas gracias a todos nuestros panelistas. Lamentablemente,
Thank you to all our panelists. Unfortunately, our time is gone, but I think we have already issued some conclusions during this morning for the second panel. There are tremendous opportunities in the region, and there are several factors that we have to work on because we have the funds, we have the interest to invest, we have projects. And there are two things that require energy. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to all our exhibitors in the second panel. This was the topic that someone does. This is a transmission that is being done by our YouTube channel and the Finance Ministry, and will be registered in this platform so that you may review its content.
El segundo panel estaba moderado por Solange Bersley y que claramente daba una visión, por supuesto, de lo que nos ha enfocado el día de hoy. Vamos en los próximos momentos a invitar al ministro de Hacienda, Mario Marcel, para que también entregue algunas palabras aquí sobre el escenario, sumándose además a los oradores que hemos tenido en la mañana, partiendo por supuesto, el gobernador regional, Jorge Fríes, quien estuvo aquí dando la bienvenida en una primera etapa, porque esto luego va a tener mesas de trabajo durante la tarde, y posteriormente el presidente del BID, quien también fue uno de los oradores, y el presidente Gabriel Boric, quien estuvo prácticamente toda la mañana de esta conferencia. Vamos ahora sí a invitar al ministro de Hacienda, Mario Marcel, para que entregue sus palabras esta mañana. Les pedimos un fuerte aplauso.
Muy buenas tardes ya. Bueno, es un gusto dar esta parte de este Foro Internacional de Inversiones. Y quise partir haciendo
I'd like to begin by
un recuerdo personal que ilustrativo de cómo cambian las cosas.
stating how things changed. When I was a teenager,
Mi padre, que era un pequeño empresario, pero que era
I
muy
was a
inquieto
small
por la
entrepreneur, but
tecnología
very
y innovaciones.
curious
Instaló en
regarding
nuestra casa un panel solar.
innovation, installed a solar panel
Estamos hablando de
in our house.
mediados de los años 70. Y en aquella época, cuando
And in those times,
varios años, valí con mi papá porque no tenía ducha
I was
cercana.
angry with my father because the water was just mildly warm. It was hard to think that solar energy would become an important source of energy to feed cities' industries.
Más o menos en esa misma época había
And at that same time,
donde el viento era, ¿cierto?, una curiosidad para los que veníamos de afuera.
the wind was a need for those that came from abroad.
Para que no gastara el viento. Y tampoco, ¿cierto?, en aquel momento no podíamos
At
imaginar
that
que,
time, we
50
couldn't
años
imagine that
tarde,
in 50 years later,
sería, una de
this
las
would be
grandes oportunidades
one of the
desarrollo
biggest development opportunities of this
Eso,
region.
por supuesto, ha sido posible
That
gracias
has
a
been
la evolución de la
possible
tecnología,
thanks to the
también
evolution of
a la
technology and
evolución
also the
de
evolution
la forma
of
en
the
que
form in which
ciudadanos y
citizens
ciudadanas
around the world
miramos,
look
¿cierto?, los desafíos que tenemos
at the
en materia
challenges
de
we have
producción limpia.
regarding clean
Nos hemos
production.
reunido acá,
We have met here
públicos,
in the
privados,
public and
civil,
private sector,
en Punta Arenas,
civil society in Punta Arenas,
para escuchar, aprender, dialogar acerca de las oportunidades de los
to have a dialogue regarding
Este
the
encuentro se ha ido
opportunities and
llamando
resources.
Inversión con
This
Propósito.
meeting has
Pero
been
también
called
hemos hablado de los
Meeting of
desafíos,
Investments with Purpose,
porque
but we
este tipo de
also
inversiones
speak
tienen características
about the
especiales,
challenges
tienen
because
que ver con industria y formas de producción
we have spoke about special characteristics that are related to industries that are in development.
muchas veces chocan
And that's why they sometimes clash against the regulation and form of business. And that's why they require strategies that needed to face. We are facing one part of the day, have faced it already, where we could exchange experience, knowledge, recognize each other, and sow the seeds of more long-term alliances. I think that we have to say that sustainable growth goes beyond the imposition of an agenda with international organisms or certain governments. Today, we are concerned about sustainable growth because it's a vision for humanity where public policies, investors, and companies must respond to ensure that the next generations can enjoy social economical benefits in our country, but especially to do business according to the preferences of the citizenship. So this is sustainable development is a priority in these investments, and the fact that we're in Punta Arenas is not a casualty because Magallanes is a region that was concerned for a long time regarding the disappearance of the ozone layer. And at the same time, it has become a region that can contribute and transform in a privileged destination for investments with a purpose. For this, when we look at it from the perspective of development of the region, the perspective of ambitions of a country, there's something very simple that we must learn, which is that sustainable growth is equal to sustained growth. Chile is a country that has had stages in its development where it has had an intensive growth in natural resources, non-renewable resources, where production modes weren't particularly friendly for the environment, and they found limitation and regulations that were adapted to ensure sustainability. Within that, our growth rhythm was affected. That's why this equation, sustainable growth plus inclusive growth is something that has to be sustained. This is reflected in actions that investors take and the trust to invest in the long term and to find the adequate financing mechanism. In this region, we have registered 8 investment projects for $12,000 million in energy and global services as part of the work done by InvestChile. The challenges of carrying these projects forward are different than foreign investment in the region. There are countries that have been in the mining business for 40 years in Chile, but not so for new industries where there is not experience accumulated or installed. And that should remind us that foreign investment, the challenge is not just in attracting investors for a particular project, but to bring capital and technology and industry that comes to Chile, that install in Chile. And for us, it's necessary to build a dialogue, a permanent dialogue. This, in Chile, we have learned it through the years. Just as we have mining and investment, we have other industries installed in Chile that have been developing their businesses, and that's what we have to achieve. Magallanes has had development in these industries that grow and decline. But there is this diversification space that we have mentioned in this, we have talked about in this seminar. As part of what has been the agenda of this forum, and we have spoken a lot about Chile and Magallanes, but there are things that go beyond our frontiers and are related to the challenges we have as a region in Latin America and the Caribbean. Normally, when we have seminars and we meet to speak about our problem, people meet to speak about their plans for the future, precisely because it's a region that's rich in natural resources, a region that's able to learn from all the instability and volatility periods, because it's a region that in the last crisis that has had more stability than other region. We have a certain base that we can take to discuss in these opportunities, and we have a lot of challenges that are related to our own capacity to integrate and collaborate as a region. And we have to say that when you approach someone and say, look, we have this project in Peru or Argentina, we have to think in our region, not as a region where economy and competitivity is a sum-zero game. Our region has capacity to collaborate among each other. During the meeting of governors, we will see a series of projects regarding that matter, and we have to state this challenge of looking ourselves at a region able to generate a sum zero positive. This within the scope of investment with purpose that is relevant, because precisely what we are listening to in the panel of how countries before discussing on the details of an investment project asks themselves what characteristics does the country have, and more broadly, in what region is it. That will be part of what we will be discussing in the following days in Santiago, and we will take many of the ideas and concepts that have arisen in this encounter to enrich that conversation. In the afternoon, you will have workshops with the Chilean regulators. And tomorrow you will visit the plant. So we're not closing this, but we are just at an intermediate point. And I wish you can take advantage of this, the rest of your time left in this event and in Magallanes. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to the Ministry of Finance, Mario Marcel. In spite of the challenge we are facing that are common to all the economies in productivity growth and the need to work in a more inclusive future and sustainable one. And that's why it's important to know what Chile is doing in that regard.
Inaugural del Foro Internacional de Inversiones Punta Arenas 2025, Inversión Verde en América Latina y el Caribe, Soluciones con Alcance Global.
A nombre del Gobierno Regional de Magallanes, del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo BID, del Ministerio de Hacienda y de la Agenda de Promoción de la Inversión Extranjera de nuestro país, InvestChile, les agradecemos su participación durante esta mañana en el seminario y los invitamos a seguir participando junto a nosotros en las mesas de trabajo de esta tarde y en futuras actividades. Que tengan buen día. Gracias.